Hello, Frizzle Fleet. I do not give out 5 stars all that often. I'm not incredibly stingy, but I only rate about 10% of the books I read 5 stars, excluding rereads, which are oftentimes 5 stars in the first place. And even in a series that I really, really love, I often won't give all of the books 5 stars. But occasionally a series comes along where I can just give every book 5 stars because I love them all that much. And these are just so precious and fun and exciting, and the Vorkosigan series so far is one of them. I am obsessed with this series. I've only read 6 of the books so far, and all of them have been fantastic, and we are here to talk about 4 of them. First, The Warrior's Apprentice. This book starts the story of Miles Vorkosigan. He is desperate to be able to get into the prestigious military academy so that he can make a name for himself out there in a military career. Because he really drew the short stick in terms of overall body health and especially bones. All of his life he has had terribly breakable bones, which make him pretty much automatically fail any physical test that he might have to go face. And his home planet is incredibly ableist, so this has caused him many problems in life and has caused quite a chip on his shoulder to develop. In the beginning of the book, he flunks out of the academy entrance exams because of that physical test and is very sad about it. And this is where the trouble begins. And this is one of the things that I love about these books, that no matter how peaceful and innocuous things might start out with, you know the trouble is coming and it will be huge. And what is the enormous trouble in this book? Well, first he finds one guy who's down on his luck and accidentally acquires him as a lackey that's oath-sworn to Miles, and then gets into an enormous amount of debt and has to become a space smuggler to pay it off quickly. All the while pretending to be much more competent than he is and making it up as he goes along. What charmed me about this book is that Miles has so many problems. But here's the kicker. He's always creating his own problems. He starts out with one problem, he tries to solve it by creating a new bigger problem, and then he tries to solve that by creating a new bigger problem. And then this chain of irony just keeps going. And this book manages to balance all of that without ever feeling too hectic or hopeless. It's just fun. Every time I thought, this can't get any worse, right? It did. And somehow also through every single step got better because the problems were being solved. Just new problems were also being created at the same time. Miles's catchphrase in this book is that he has to keep his forward momentum. It's like the most extreme fake it till you make it policy. And this is both his strength and his weakness, and I love this analogy of comparing Miles to something that's full of momentum. Momentum, in a scientific sense, is kind of made out of 2 things. In order to have big momentum, you need big speed and big mass. You've got to be fast and you've got to be big. And that is how you get actual enormous momentum going. Miles, he's got the speed. He is go, 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 man. He very rarely lets himself pause because he knows as soon as he pauses, him and everyone else around him will have way too much quality time to realize, what are we doing? It is time to bail out. But then there is also an element of Miles that is large. Not physically, but personality-wise. He is such a charismatic leader that he can pull off just getting random strangers to swear to him as his lackeys, that he can pull off suddenly becoming a fairly successful space smuggler, and all the other rabbit holes that he goes into in this book. And here's the other thing about momentum. The larger your momentum, the more spectacularly destructive your crash is going to be. Because it takes a whole lot of energy to stop you once you're going that fast and getting that big. And this is also Miles. Because when he's playing the fake it till you make it game, he is cruising. But then whenever it comes to a stop, whenever he gets in a crash, whenever there's a hiccup, the results are spectacularly bad. And that just adds such high stakes to this story to keep it chugging along the whole time. I do think that all of these books are more character focused than they are plot focused, but you gotta love the plots of these books. They can get outlandish and entertaining without ever feeling surreal or illogical. I rated The Warrior's Apprentice 5 stars. Easy. And now let's talk about Mountains of Mourning, a novella that takes place a year or 2 after Warrior's Apprentice. And this novella is heavily interested in the politics and culture of Miles's home planet, Barrayar. I mentioned before that they're extremely ableist, but wait, there's more that's very interesting about this. Because their political structure is highly feudalistic. Everything is arranged in these chains of command of lords and underlings, and the most important thing in the society is your word, especially if you're one of those lords. Not like the law or anything, no, your word. And the most fascinating thing to me about the system of government is that this book showcases that it kind of actually really works well. The system where the leaders are given the ultimate control and also the ultimate duty to take care of their people, where the spirit of the law and the opinion of the Lord is always more important than the letter of the law. And yes, in real life, this would quickly become an entirely corrupt disaster. But in this fictional universe, it's really entertaining and a fascinating thought experiment. So Miles, surprise, is pretty much a prince. He is set to inherit his father's very important lordship one day. And because of this, sometimes he has political duties, and in this novella, he is sent out to the middle of nowhere village to investigate a murder case. To investigate and find the murderer, decide what that murderer's punishment should be, and deliver it. And this novella does so many interesting things with the overall culture of Barrayar and the character development of Miles. But what's most interesting to me, and relevant to this review of these books, is that it demonstrates how important Barrayaran culture is to Miles. He could easily, like his friend Elena, who I'll get to in a minute, leave the planet and never look back. It's not like this culture has treated him kindly. Yes, he has a duty to become this lord one day, but there's backups in the line of succession. It's not like everything would collapse because he leaves. But to Miles, this duty to Barrayar is so important. And on top of that, he doesn't just want to survive on Barrayar. He wants to change Barrayar to force everyone to accept him for who he is, even if it's not the ideal man in this world's standards. So the novella, Mountains of Mourning, I loved it. I'm obsessed with it. Easy 5 stars. The next book, The Vor Game. The interesting thing about the structure of this novel is that it starts out with a section that was originally published as a novella, and honestly, I think it does wonders for the pacing of this book that it has a distinct, part 1, part 2. And they do interconnect pretty well, surprisingly well. When the interconnection happened and it was so strong, my jaw dropped because I was not expecting some plot points to be relevant later. And I feel like that's one of the themes of this novel, that everything comes back to bite Miles in the end, including events from The Warrior's Apprentice. Through the course of that book, Miles temporarily and mostly accidentally became the commander of this mercenary fleet. But Miles doesn't really want anything to do with this mercenary fleet. He's fine with just letting them do their thing, and he'll do his thing building up his career on Barrayar, his homeworld. But the mercenary fleet isn't done with him. And a lot of this book is Miles realizing how to command people, how to lead, what's good ways to do it and what's bad ways to do it, and his duty to this mercenary fleet. In his mind and heart, his duty to Barrayar is so large that it's like it pushed out everything else. But then here he has to do that flip-flop, where he realizes, wait, these are my people too. They might not be for my homeworld, but they're my people. And Miles knows how important it is to take care of your people. That's his whole culture. That's his whole identity. And let's talk about some of the characters. This is the book where I fell head over heels in love with Miles. This was the 4th book I had read with Miles. I didn't read the series in order. And I liked him a lot in all of those books. But by this book, he's like my comfort character. He's so entertaining. I'm really getting to know him, and he is just chef's kiss. A fantastic protagonist from top to bottom. But we also get to know some other characters in this book, so I want to discuss that a little bit. First, I would like to talk about the Barrayaran Emperor Gregor, because I had such a whiplash from this book. I first met Emperor Gregor through the eyes of a completely different character in book 9. And in book 9, he was presented as this wise, mature, powerful person who honestly I assumed was an old man. But then in the Vor Game, he's seen through Miles's eyes, and him and Miles have been childhood playmates, and at this point in the series, Gregor hasn't been emperor for all that long. And seeing that vulnerability in Gregor, before, I thought Gregor was a pretty boring character. But after this book, after seeing what drives him, his strengths and weaknesses, I'm in love with Gregor too. I'm in love with all the characters of this book, okay? I'm obsessed. And lastly, I would like to talk about Elena. Elena is one of the other childhood friends of Miles, and she got her opportunity to leave Barrayar and join the mercenaries, and she took it. took it so fast. Because the planet of Barrayar, in addition to being incredibly ableist, is also incredibly sexist. And Elena, having come from that society, starts out the series really burying her ambitions deep. Very shy and timid and not trusting in her own strengths. Which is why I love this novel so much, because it showcases how much she's grown, how much character development she's gotten to have. Because she got away from Barrayar and she grew her wings. So the Vor Game, unsurprisingly, I rated this book 5 stars. And then we come to the next novel, Cetaganda. And this is the first one where I really have some nitpicks and complaints to express, so let's get into that. Miles and his cousin Ivan get sent to the powerful planet Cetaganda as political emissaries to attend this important funeral. And one of my nitpicks about this book is that a lot of the plot revolves around discovering the truth of Cetagandan politics. At every turn, Miles is learning more about how their political system works and is always surprised because that's not what the public image of the planet says. But here's the issue. I didn't have any grasp of how the political system's reputation was. So when Miles is discovering all of these shocking reveals, I had no context for them. I didn't care. It wasn't a shocking reveal because the book had never given to me in the first place how Miles really expected this all to work. I never got to see the original paradigm, so having it shift wasn't impactful. And then this book wastes time on this subplot. Wasting time? Yes, no. We'll discuss it. Because there is so much page time devoted in this book to Miles pining after this very beautiful lady who is very powerful in Cetagandan politics. He is entirely obsessed with her, like much more even than I'm obsessed with Miles. And this is entirely unrequited. She does not care about him at all. And it just felt so foolish of Miles. And it's not that Miles was being stupid that I take issue with. Miles is stupid in every book at different points. He's always making foolish decisions, and it's part of the entertainment value for him. No. The reason that I didn't like this plot is because Miles was being both stupid and passive. If he's making stupid active decisions and really pushing forward on the plot, I'm totally on board. But for this, he wasn't like courting this lady. He wasn't really even flirting with this lady. He wasn't actually pursuing anything. He was just wallowing in his own self-pity that he's too ugly to be with her. Yeah, get over it. Or don't get over it and make some rash decisions so at least there's something to do. Miles, like in every novel in this series, quickly gets entrapped in plots that get way more complicated and serious than you would ever expect from the setup. And I would say the heart of this book is Miles realizing his own motivations. I wish there had been a little bit more on that, but I will now stop my quibbling and talk about all the reasons that I loved this book. Because at every step of this plot, at any time, Miles could have aborted. He could have involved the proper authorities, but he keeps making excuses of why he shouldn't do that. And most of the time, the excuses don't really make sense, and in the end, it all boils down to Miles's ego. Because he doesn't just want to solve this political problem. He wants to be known as the person who did it. He doesn't want to get help from his superior officers. He wants to prove to them that he can solve problems on his own and deserves their respect. And honestly, this is a character flaw of Miles in this book and the rest of the series, that he's often getting into trouble and doing things that he doesn't need to do, all in pursuit of his ego only, which makes him a great contrast to his cousin Ivan. And let me talk about Miles and Ivan for a little bit here because I love their relationship and I love the character of Ivan. What's interesting to me is I've heard from the fandom that not everyone loves Ivan, which was almost confusing to me. But then I remembered that I read these books out of order, and when I was first introduced to Ivan in book 8, it was in a favorable light. But if I had been introduced to Ivan in like book 4, I could see me not liking him as much because he's not introduced in a favorable light back there. And let me give a quick compliment to the audiobook narrator for these novels, because when he was voicing the arguments between Ivan and Miles, oh, I was laughing so hard. It was done so well. So, what's up with Ivan? Ivan is tall and muscular and a ladies' man. He's also compassionate, practical, and smart. But these characteristics are not as often noticed by Miles, our protagonist. So sometimes they fade into the background. And Miles and Ivan have this relationship that is very close because they kind of grew up together. But at this point in the series, they don't exactly like each other. It's more like they're tolerating each other. And they are these foils to each other. One of their strengths is the other one's weaknesses and vice versa. Like, they're both smart and accomplished, but the way that this presents is completely different. Miles has this drive that everyone needs to know how awesome he is. He's got this huge ego he's always fueling. But Ivan? He's got like no ego. Ivan just wants to be happy. Ivan doesn't care if he has a flashy job. Ivan doesn't even really care if he gets insulted or if people think less of him. He's just out here to have a good time. He's a very simple soul in that way. Both Miles and Ivan often miss the big picture of a situation. Miles, because he gets too obsessed with all the little things and they take over his mind and he can't consider anything else. Ivan, on the other hand, is just like, Hakuna Matata, I don't care. He is so chill to Miles's off-the-rails, manic obsessive qualities. And Ivan is much better with people at social situations because he just has better social skills than Miles, but also he's fundamentally more compassionate and empathetic and caring than Miles is. Miles often just sees people as tools to an end, but Ivan is genuinely trying to make the most of every social situation and is very good at making friends because of that. They're both charismatic, but Miles is charismatic in the way that he is like such a gung-ho inspirational leader because you can feel his passion burning off of him like lava. But Ivan is a good people person because he cares about people and it shows. And all of these little contrasts and interesting things make me wish that Miles and Ivan would team up more often because their strengths and weaknesses balance each other so nicely, and in that way they make such an awesome power team. And also it's just super entertaining because they're always arguing and disagreeing about things, but in the end are there to support each other because they're cousins, and that's an important bond to both of them. So in the end, I rated Cetaganda 5 stars. Yes, I didn't love it quite as much as the other books in this series I've read, but I was still obsessed with it, still wanted to immediately reread it, still tore through this thing. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to my patrons. Subscribe for videos on Frizzle Fridays.